All right. After having talked about Scrum overall, we've talked about sprint planning, we've talked about the daily stand-up or the daily Scrum. So after you continue having these daily meetings and getting all this work done, hopefully you've reached the point at the end of your sprint that then you're going to go have your sprint review with your client, your customer, your stakeholder, whatever we want to call them. And now, how do we actually run a sprint review? And so this is what I'm going to talk about now, is how to actually run the sprint review. What are the expectations in 342 for sprint reviews? I'll note that there is also a document in Learn that goes over this material. It's written down. The basics of what should happen at a sprint review and the expectations for behavior. Use that to get more details if needed, rather than just this lecture. All right, so sprint reviews. All right, now this is something that's sort of been added into the sprint review with respect to 342. I think it's applicable for the real world as well, but it's something that's really important in 342 because it falls off sort of the radar of students. They seem to forget about this. So by us incorporating it as a mandatory portion of the review, it makes sure that students actually deal with it and cover it. Is that we really want our client. The client really should know where to get the deployed software prior to the meeting. Now, the best way to handle this is to send an email to the client. And you explain to the client, we're looking forward to our sprint review tomorrow. This also acts as a great reminder of the meeting, so that clients be sure to look at the calendar and make sure, oh yeah, I've got you scheduled. Yeah, so it's not a surprise to them. It's always nice to these sort of friendly reminders. You can send them an email and say, we want to let you know, like, you could get the software here. So in some projects, in some years, students have had sort of, maybe they've worked on a Java project, and so they needed them to grab a jar file or other sort of install program. Other students have worked on complex Excel spreadsheets. We've now moved to building web applications, so those sorts of things aren't going to happen. Our software is all deployed in Heroku. So this really means basically reminding the stakeholder where the client, what URL the software is at. And part of the thing is can also at this point, it's great. Have it deployed. So it's great to have it deployed. And I would go ahead and encourage the client to check it out. So the more the client uses the software, plays around with it, understands it prior to your sprint review, the more productive the sprint review is. Because the client will have a chance to show up and just immediately be able to give you feedback. This is a huge win. It saves you a lot of time, and it actually results in you getting higher quality feedback from the client. Now, I actually think that you could go ahead, and here's an idea for you. There's the deployed one. And I would say a deployed site, and this could be something that you have, could be available for active use. Clients, it's there. They could be using it. If you're really good, they would be using it, and you wouldn't wipe out their data. You might not actually be ready for that. That's sort of a new level of operational efficiency and sort of acumen. But so you could have one. You could also have, so this is, I think in 342 might be pretty rare to be able to do that. But that's a nice way to be, is, we've added new features to the system. And in a lot of cases, again, you might just have done a migration added some more tables and added more code, and all the existing data in the system stays there. So it's not that hard, but you got to be careful. You can't have someone on the team be like, oh yeah, what we do is we do a reset of the database. So you want to be clear with your client whether or not, when you have a deployed site, whether it's something that they should actually be putting real data in or not, whether they should actually start using it. If you can give them stuff that they can actually actively start using, that's even a bigger win, because now when you show up in the future, they'll have even more feedback for you on the existing system, and then your email will be, there's new features in the site. Oh, that's cool. Or, yep, we improved it. It looks better. Oh, wow, thank you so much. But all your data is still there. We didn't destroy your data. So be careful. Don't go wiping out their data. If you're going to give them a site and they're going to put real data in it, you need to know that. So have some communication. But so this, maybe there's a freshly deployed site, or maybe it's one that's for active use. You could also, by the way, have another deployment that has test data in it, or dummy with test or dummy data in it. This could be really useful for the client, because some of these applications have a lot to them to get up and running. And so, maybe, yeah, it's a system. It's supposed to have lots of users and lots of data. And for the client to test it out, it would be tedious to get it to that state where they could see, oh yeah, I can see I'm getting a report here on activity or something. So maybe there's more than one deployment that you do. Maybe there's a fresh blank one, or one that they're actively always actually starting to use and you're just updating it. And another one that you're like, oh, if you want to play around with one that's got data in it, give them another deployment. And again, one of the ideas that we have is basically go make a Heroku account that's going to be something for your client. The whole account is something that you're going to hand off. So go make a Gmail account basically that's for the project. Make a Heroku account, tie them together, whatever you need to do. That Heroku account, then you can hand over to them. They can change their email address on it, take ownership of it, whatever they need to do. But that would give you, several sites that you could actually deploy for the client under that one account, one with dummy data, one that's fresh, and so forth and so on. This could be really nice. But again, the idea is, before the meeting, they know where this stuff is. They potentially have a chance to use it. They might not. You might be sending this email late at night reminding them that you're looking forward to the meeting at 9 a.m. And so maybe they don't have much time, but still, they should know this. You should be actually having the software to them before the meeting. All right. 2. We want to see that you're basically providing instructions to the client about them actually installing the software. All right. And again, in the years when students have done things like Java and other systems, this is a bit more important. So attempt to install. And it's fine that you're sitting there and you're going to help them. You could also, this could also be before the meeting. If it's going to take a really long time. Not that they're going to want to necessarily do it or try it, but if they're going to be using new software, it's best if it's working on their system. This is especially true for an executable. Again, this whole Java sort of thing, or even like some people have done projects with lots of Excel, in Excel with tons of macros and lots of programming in Excel. And it turns out the client the students have been developing it on a PC, and the client opens up in a Mac, and they got a different version of Office, and it doesn't work. You need to discover these things, all right? It does you no good to reach the end of the project and have them do that and be like, it's all broken. We failed. Don't do that to yourself, okay? So, in the case of Rails and Heroku, again, let's say you've made this Heroku account and stuff, you could certainly provide them with a set of instructions where, and also, your client might be sophisticated enough that you're able to give them access to the GitHub repository. They become a collaborator on your repository. Not that they're actually adding code, but they're a collaborator, they have access to it. And then all you need to do is provide them with the simple instructions. Then in Heroku, to deploy it, you do this. And again, if you've got a fresh Heroku account, they could make a fresh app, okay? They could connect to the repository, deploy, pull open the console, migrate the database, it's done. The thing is, you just want the client to be able to know and have access to the whole thing. They need to know that, again, when you guys disappear at the end of the term, that they can do this sort of thing, okay? That they're not stuck without stuff. And so it's not going to be that hard, especially with all this Rails and Heroku stuff, which is a great thing, but we want to see it actually happen. So either the client is able to say, oh yeah, I got that, I'm able to do that, there's no problem at all at the meeting, check, you did it. Or you actually do it with the client at the meeting, okay? And then we know and we can see that it actually happened. All right. What else? So now again, this is not necessarily something that you would always do in the real world at sprint reviews, but it is something that we stick into 342 just to make sure that these things are happening so that we don't end up at the end of the term with students surprised that we have expectations of these sorts of things. All right. But nevertheless, in the real world, the client's got to get the software eventually. So it's going to be part somehow of the client engagement process, but might happen outside this. It might actually happen outside of the sprint review. And maybe you've gone and you've helped their technical staff get the software installed, ready for the sprint review and things like that prior to the sprint review. All right. All right, this is a big thing. Now we're really into the heart of the sprint review. Have your client use the software and give you some feedback on it. So the point is, at this stage, again, it's kind of like the paper prototyping. The hope is that you don't start with demoing. Don't start by showing. It's best to see them use it. Now, maybe you need to help them to, oh yeah, we've got a default account, we got an account set up here, log in, logins admin, passwords admin. Okay, so now you're in, and here's the new feature that we did, what do you think? Can you use it? Can you do it? Can you add a user? I don't know, whatever it is. It's really good. This is sort of your mini usability test with them. If it takes too long, maybe it's not a good idea. But I actually, so when I've been a client in the past, I want to do this because I want to put it through this test, and I want to understand if I really know it and understand what's going on to really be able to give feedback to the team. It's really important to me, and I actually think it's really good. Now, some clients might not be receptive to it. That's fine. You know, you are going to have to find what works best for your client. But I suggest you give this a try, because if they are able to start using it and give you feedback, or you see them have trouble understanding things, you'll learn a lot more than asking them questions or asking them for feedback, because you saw them like they had no idea which button to press. Or they said, I don't know, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do on this page. And you realize, I guess I should put some instructions on the page. That sort of stuff is really valuable. Otherwise, if you're showing them, oh yeah, of course, that's what that page is for. But down the road, they sit down and they try to use it and they can't remember, what was I supposed to do on this page? And the downside of that is when I, as an instructor, go to them at the end of the course and be like, all right, were you able to install the software? Are you able to use the software? Will you use it? And they go, yeah, I've been trying to use it for the last couple of days, and I really don't understand what I was supposed to do with certain pages, and there's not documentation, there's no instructions. I don't think I'm really going to be able to use the software. That has a really negative impact on the overall value of the project. So the more you can test and get this thing covered at the sprint review, the better. Okay. So, and again, you can be providing them a version that's got some dummy data that might be more useful than a completely blank system. And then, all right, so they're done with that. Now it really is time to make sure this is no matter what, you've got to be sure that you get to this stage, which is you show them what the completed value is. So what was it that you did to this software this last 2 weeks during your sprint that gave them something of utility, of value, that increased the value of the software? And you're going to get feedback on that new material that you're actually showing them. It's important that you make clear what you changed. So don't assume that they understand your changes. You know, they might not be paying attention from week to week. They're busy, their job, they got other things going on. Now is the time that if they didn't understand that this is new, that you explain that this is new. One of the things here, well, I put value, so we usually consider this to be new working software, new features, changes that are visible to the client. There are lots of times, though, where you might have done things on the back end. Oh, we improved the speed of this, the performance of this. And it might be noticeable that the client can see it if it was really slow before. But maybe it was something to handle increased load for large numbers of simultaneous users. Well, they're probably not going to see that in the demo or you walking and showing them through things. So in that sense, often what you would do if it's like some sort of performance or load capacity thing, you will have done already for you to have made the decision that you've actually got that task done, that story done to improve the performance. You will have done a set of testing, and that testing can be presented in graphs and charts and things. And you show, look, before we could only simultaneously handle 50 users, but with these changes we can now easily, your system will be able to handle 1,000 users on a typical setup. See what a great improvement we made for you? Oh, great, thank you very much. Other things, like optimization algorithms that might be in various products. It could be, oh, well, based upon our existing prior metric of how well the system was optimizing, we were getting scores like this. But now that we've made changes to the optimization algorithm, now we've increased its performance by 30%. Again, they're not going to visually see that sort of thing. It's an algorithm internal to the system, but you still need to communicate that you've made those changes in some way to them and show them something so that they can understand the value that you've contributed and changed to the product for them. All right, then you're at a good stage now. Ask them any questions that you have. All right, you might be trying to figure out the priority of the next set of work. All sorts of stuff. So be asking those questions. These are questions that most likely you as a team have come up with prior to the meeting. These aren't just off the top of your head questions. Now, you might have some based upon your conversation with them, but in a lot of cases, these are going to be things that you're like, going into the sprint review, after going through this sprint, we realize we need to ask them this stuff. And you make a list. It's kind of like your prep that you did for your client interviews. You're going to prep, be ready for that sprint review to get it to be high value, that you're prepared, you're on the ball for it. Okay, now be sure to ask them if they have any other questions that they want to ask. You always want to be sure to have, throughout all of this, you be sure that you give them a final say. All right. Oh, did you have any more questions? Great. Then now's the time that the team really should summarize what the team sees based upon the discussion you've basically had, because you might have to do this and talk about in front of the client and figure it out what the highest priority work is going to be. Because this is one of the big things you want to come out with from a sprint review is, what are we doing next? What does the client think should be in the, basically, as we work and decide what will go into that sprint, we want to be doing the right stuff. What's the most important stuff to get done? As you near the end of this project with these 4 sprints, you may very well find at the end of the 3rd sprint that you have a conversation with the client that's like, look, we only have 1 sprint left. There's all this still work that could be done. And you guys will probably have a good sense of how much can get done in the sprint, because you will have gotten a good feel for size of stories and things. And the client might be like, oh, I really want that done. And you might go, well, if we work on that, we'll only be able to do like 1 other thing. Oh, and the client goes, oh my goodness gracious, you're kidding me. So if I take this thing, I can only get 1 other little thing. And they're like, so if I don't take that, how much of the others can I get? And you go, oh, well, and you can get all of those, but that other one's a really big one. Oh, and the client may very well be like, no, that's not the highest priority if now I understand that that's all I can get by the end of the project. So that's sometimes the conversation that you're going to hold there. But you really want, this is summarizing. We as a team and you as a client, we're on the same page as what our priorities are. All right. So then you've wrapped up the meeting. And following the meeting, you email a meeting summary within 24 hours to the client, and as well in 342 to your instructor and your TA, although your TA is your client this time around, so there's no difference there. All right. And an important thing besides summarizing overall the meeting and summarizing the priorities of the work that's next, always sort of the big thing is, what are the to-do items? So there might be other to-do items. Oh yeah, we're going to send you a copy of this, or we're going to, this or that. These are some tasks that came out of the meeting besides figuring out the priorities of stories. Note those to-do items. And by the way, who did they get assigned to? Who's doing those to-do items? Make that really clear. And this, by the way, is actually a general habit to get into for meetings, whether they're with clients, whether they're with your manager, whether they're with other teams. Take charge of producing the email summary for meetings that includes the to-do items. And usually what you'll say in those emails is, all right, here's the summary, and here are the to-do items that were agreed upon. If there's anything that you think need to be added or removed from this summary, please let me know. And the great thing about that is now you have it in writing, because you put it in writing. You gave them a chance to hit reply and say, no, that's not a to-do item, or no, those priorities are wrong. You You're not, though, going to ever go back to the client and say, you told us this and you told us that. You're not going to act that way. But in general, it's a really good professional way to manage meetings, because it always produces who's doing what, and there's a written record. Usually doesn't take you that long to produce these, but it's a habit you should actually get into. That reminds me, though, I want to talk one thing about, so you run a sprint review. One of the things that can happen, absolutely, though, is that your client can ask for things that before they told you they didn't want. And likewise, you can show them something that they had asked for one week and that they will say, I don't really want that anymore. That is normal. That is to be expected. Again, both you and the client are working towards, remember, you're trying to reach a shared understanding about what really is the solution to the problem. And sometimes clients don't really understand and know what their problem is or what they really need to solve it, and neither do you. And you're going to work out this together. And there's going to be some work done that gets thrown away. Classic is to say that we have to build it twice to get it right, so don't get upset at your client. Don't accuse them of things and say you told us you wanted this and now you're all mad at them. Agile is accepting of change. Agile understands that change is natural in products, and that's why we work in this iterative fashion. Client wants something different. That's great. We're learning. We're working in this fashion to be able to adapt and make those changes. If you want to go and get mad at clients, you need to go do waterfall or big planning up front and things where you have clients sign contracts, and then you can whip the contract out and say, see, you signed this and you said you wanted this. All right. Go do another process if that's the way you want to behave with your client. If you want to be able to be accepting of change, be accepting of change and do agile. Okay. All right, so that's about the overall running of the meeting and sort of the team. One of the things that we found that's important to talk about in 342 with students is actually what is expected for individual behavior at these meetings. Obviously, you have to show up, and you have to show up and be on time. So let's just not, I ain't going to bother to write that down. All right, so your attendance is required and show up on time. What else about individual behavior? One of the things is it's critical to get in the habit of listening and taking notes. Now, when we have sprint reviews in person, it's really obvious whether people are taking notes, whether they're typing on their laptop or using pen and pencil and paper. They are able to demonstrate visually to the client that they're taking notes, they're active in this. When you're going to be working remotely, you're going to have your microphones muted. You'll probably be taking notes on your computer, especially if you have a dual monitor. It's going to be hard to really make it clear that you're paying attention. Try your best, okay? One thing, though, that everyone will see, by the way, though, is even if you're remote, if you are pulling out your phone and screwing around on your phone, don't do that. Don't do that in person, all right? So it's no phones. Put your phones, make them silent. Don't even be bothered by them. The only time that you would want to have a phone that could bother you in a meeting is if you knew there was some sort of family potential emergency. You have a spouse who's about to give birth, or someone else is in the hospital and you need to be notified about things. Otherwise, your phone should be out or silent or off and away. And so this ties in, and the taking notes is critical. You're going to need these notes for the team's purpose, to be able to help you craft your summary of the meeting, to capture other quotes about what the client said. Again, it's like holding that client interview, and you're holding it in a different shape and form. This time you're getting to talk about the actual software in hand, and it's a continuation of this conversation. So it's the same sort of thing that you're going to do. You need to be in the habit of taking notes at meetings. So this ties into being attentive. Do your best. But with remote, again, what this is going to mean is you got to have your cameras on. Okay? None of this, I got my camera off. If your camera off, I know you're like not even there, okay? You're sleeping on the floor. Who knows what you're doing, okay? Camera's on, all right? Your client is most likely going to be watching you in gallery mode, seeing everyone. It's going to be obvious if you're busy, doing other stuff. So get your cameras on. That's your biggest way to show that you're attentive. In person, it's really important, and it's important remotely as well. Although it's going to be a million times harder for people to know whether you're doing these things, because hopefully it's going to look like you're taking notes and you're attentive. But in person, absolutely, don't be going off into your email applications unless you're needing to find an email relevant to the meeting. Don't be doing other work. That means, you're not off going into Facebook. You're not looking at other sites. That's not appropriate. It's not appropriate here. Same way your phone should be away. Absolutely don't be picking up your phones and texting people. All right. So the showing of attention is a really important thing. You want that client to know that you're listening to them. And you should be, okay? So let's just do it. Be professional in all ways. Now, sometimes some students have said, oh, do I need to wear, like dress up like it's an interview with business attire and stuff? The answer is no. You need to look like a nice, presentable student. And so really though, the big things, so on the looks, fine. On the looks, I will say, certainly no offensive clothing. Some people have desires at times to wear t-shirts with inappropriate sayings on them. Please don't wear those sorts of things. You should look decent, okay? But you don't have to dress up for it. I know everything's remote, but it shouldn't look like you're in your pajamas and things like that. All right. Because again, your camera's going to be on. Big thing though is language. And I see some students have problems with this. One, you need to focus on being, use your pleases and thank yous. Be polite. Of course, you're not going to be interrupting people. But the big one, I've seen some students make a mistake. They'll swear. You can't swear. You cannot swear at all, ever. Certainly not with a client, okay? So, verboten, don't do it. Shouldn't have to be said, but it does. Be professional in your manner, okay? Or having manners, I guess. I wonder, strange notes on my part. And again, it comes back, you should be listening. Be prepared to, if someone says, oh, and what did you think? You'd better have been listening, all right? In general, your goal would be really that the client, now not all clients are talkative, but you should be aiming for the client should talk as much or more than you do. And here is a good little trick for you to know. So whether it's you're having like a co-op interview or you're in these meetings with clients, that in general, so let's say a client asks you a question or an interviewer asks you a question in a co-op interview. Good idea, really general, is not to talk more than 2 minutes. You might have 10 minutes of something that you want to tell them when they ask you a really intriguing question. But what you need to do is you need to have an internal clock that says, I think I talked for about 2 minutes. And I might have more to say, but I'm going to say, oh, I have lots more to say, but I'm going to stop there. Do you want to hear more, or has that been enough? most of the time the other person will tell you, oh, that was enough. That was really great. Thanks. Because they already have another question for you. So cut yourself off. Don't find yourself dominating and talking for long periods of time. All right. And then this is something for MSci 342, although it's not a bad thing for the real world. But we would really like each person to show their own contribution as possible. So I know we're going to have multiple people work on something. We already have aimed to have multiple people work on a story. And so it might only work for one person to be showing that off. But that person should be giving credit to other people and say, I and this other person and this other person, we all worked on this. Could be the whole team worked on it. That's great too. So be sure to give credit to others if you're showing work that they contributed to. This is good manners, but it also, the nice thing is teammates like the acknowledgement. So whether it's coming from a boss or a peer, they like to know that they're getting their fair share of the credit for the work that they did. So be sure to remember to do that. Be generous and remembering to always be giving credit where credit is due. It'll serve you well in this world. And likewise, one of the things that we're aiming here is that by having people show their contribution, this idea is to give everyone practice at these sprint reviews. What I don't like is to see sprint reviews where only 2 people talk all term long and everyone else is just kind of, yeah, I guess I'm taking notes. Meanwhile, these two, and so the team seems to have given some sort of, yeah, you're going to run the sprint review. Absolutely. That's not what we want. That's one aspect where we don't want it like a regular client interview. We don't just want one focus of attention. We want students to practice and gain the practice of talking to a client, to be able to practice and show off the work of them and their colleagues, okay? That's what we want to see happen here. All right. And I think that is the conclusion of that, but just to check. Yeah, that's it. All right.